Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Kick Off Your Damn Heels. I am Dr. Tara Lynn, and I am here with I'm going to call you my spirit animal, Nadia Ahrens. I'm doing that because I feel like I have met my match on the other side of this podcast. So Nadia, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So just as a disclaimer, Nadia swears like a sailor, and so do I. So you might have some of that. So if you're in your car listening to the podcast and you got your kiddos in the back, I don't know, it's your choice. Turn it on, turn it off, whatever you want to do. All right. So
I kind of love that I just got a disclaimer.
People have done it to me too, and I'm like, wow, really? Am I that bad sometimes? Anyway,
I just took it as a badge of honor. I was like, yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Forewarned people.
So, firstly, I just found out something about Nadia this morning, that she's actually I call it a recovering therapist because, a therapist by trade, but kind of moving into the coaching world, which is what I'm doing too. So I found that to be fascinating. But let's get started. I want to hear your story about how that happened and what you want to talk about today.
So I have been a therapist for 19 years, and 3 years ago is really when I started to shift into coaching. About 2 years ago. But that turning point was 3 years ago. My 8.5-year-old son unexpectedly died. Yeah. And as you can imagine, or not.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
I really can't.
You actually don't want to imagine it because it's the worst fucking thing that will ever happen to, I know, me or anybody who has experienced that in their life. And so needless to say, I stopped seeing clients for, I don't know, it's, the whole year, that whole first year is pretty much a blur. So my timing is always off on that. But I stopped seeing clients. I just cleared house, and it was a few months before I started to consider going back. But early on in my grief, I was, it was the on the floor moment where I was on the floor of his bedroom, just crying and feeling the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I didn't want to live. I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. I didn't want to be experiencing this. I couldn't picture life without him. And I just was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just live a passively suicidal life, just waiting to die. I'll just play the victim card and just wait until I die. And then my next thought was my grandmother, who at the time was 98, and she just passed last week, and she was 101. Mm-hmm. And I thought of her and I went, shit, I'm probably going to be here for a while because I've got her fucking genes and she's still kicking and completely 100% with it. And I went, this other way, this victim, passively suicidal way of life is going to be even worse, knowing that I might be here for another 60 years. So right. And like literally, and my only other option is to transform the shit out of the worst fucking experience I will ever experience in my life. And so, and in that moment, I was like, okay, I got to do the things, right? Which is going to get me not to happy, but to just get me off the fucking floor, and get my 2 other children to school and be somewhat of a functional human being. And so my journey was, it was straight up self-care. I would meditate, I would cry, I would journal. And then eventually I got back into exercise because that always helps my mental health. And I have a ton of amazing girlfriends who were taking me to the exercise classes that they hated. And
literally dragging you there. Like, we
right,
are
and they're like, when is she going to be able to go on her own again? Because this sucks. But and so they kind of got me there. And then eventually when I got back into it, they
They
stopped.
left you there.
They left me there, but they got me there, which was the point, and so, through these steps, I've created a system, to help other women, transform the shit out of their lives. It might not be the death of a child or a death of a loved one. It could be divorce. It could be, a breakup. It could be a job loss. It could be like not knowing who the hell they are.
I was going to say, listen, it could just be the death of your soul. Like, the soul sucking bullshit that we go through every single day of our lives. Like sometimes we need a rebirth,
Dude, like me and you, man, like
I know.
I'm like, we could just have like psychic communication, but it would be a super quiet show. So
Yeah, right.
we don't want to do that.
Let's just sit here in silence for a minute.
Right.
I could never do that anyway.
No. Well, and a lot of it is like codependency, and it's like, and as women, I think we're so conditioned also to put ourselves last.
Yeah.
And to put everybody on the list in front of us, that we're our batteries are drained, we're resentful, we're giving people what's left of us versus what's best of us. And then we wonder, like, why does my life suck? And they can't figure it out. So like, I'm here to help them kind of, figure that shit out. And so that they could really transform their lives with these really simple steps like self-care and boundaries and learning about codependency and how that shows up in their life, and then making those shifts so that they could, put themselves first. Because once you start putting yourself first, it's like the oxygen mask is on. Like, you're like, all right, I could do the things.
It's funny. So I saw this video and I always forget what it's called when you are in high altitude, oxygen deprived, and you literally, it's called something. Anyway, if you guys know what it's called, stick it in the comments so I can remember. But anyway, it was a video and it was a guy, because I always use the oxygen mask first thing as well. But they did a whole thing on it, and he was sitting there with his mask off, and of course he had like the facilitator thing, and she was in full oxygen, okay, waiting for him. And when they got to a certain altitude, the oxygen legit left his brain, and he was holding the mask and he didn't know what to do with it. And he looked at her kind of slurry and goes, I don't want to die. But he had no idea how to put the mask to his face. And I thought to myself, I flippantly use put the oxygen mask on first before you can help anyone else, not realizing how profound, like, if you don't do that, you won't know how to help yourself, period. You will die, like,
right.
I got to find that for you, because it was, to me, I'm like, holy crap, like that whole analogy is way bigger than I ever thought.
And and as you're talking, I spent a year in Asia back in like 2002, and I went to Tibet, which is, I don't know what the altitude is, but I got altitude sickness, and I was knocked out for like a day. I couldn't get out of bed, and and it's just like, oh right, it's because of the lack of oxygen to your brain.
Yeah.
It's also why exercise and all that kind of stuff is so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Need oxygen, people. The more oxygen, the better.
Right, exactly. Can you walk me through like your process? Like, what would you normally do for someone who's like, my life just fucking sucks and I don't even know what to do?
Yeah, the first thing I teach people is all about codependency and how that shows up in life. And yes, the traditional definition is the enabler to the addict and Al-Anon and all that stuff, and then I have my own theories too, where it's like, I believe that we're all codependent on some level.
I say this all the time. I've been married for almost 24 years. I'm like, there is a level of codependency in marriage that just shows up,
Think of it this way. This is we're all connected by an umbilical cord. Like, that's how we came into this world, people. Like, there is going to be, like, as humans, there's going to be some level of that, right. And then based on your family of origin, your culture, your life experiences, kind of where on the spectrum are you of codependency? Like super codependent. Like my parents are like Bronx Italian, met at 16, run a business together, like do not leave their side. Like I used to wonder, like, why do I have a fear of commitment? My parents have been married for like 50 years. And
That's
then I'm
why.
it's a commitment. It's like, fear of being engulfed and
Yeah,
like
right?
a Brangelina monster or something,
The engulfment process. That's what you're afraid of. Yeah.
Totally, totally, and then, and then there's the other side of the spectrum where, maybe they're, not as codependent, or their, tendencies and behaviors show up in a different way, and so, I teach them about codependency, and then also, the victim triangle of like how this disempowered part of you shows up either as the victim or the martyr or the persecutor, and so when they start to learn about codependency, it kind of blows their mind, because I don't think a lot of people really understand what it is. Because again, I think they think, oh, it's just the enabler to the addict. I don't have to worry about it.
Well, it's funny because I don't think that we really talk about it. And I say we as a recovering therapist myself, not
I like that. I was saying retired therapist, but I might start using recovering therapist.
There's a whole recovery process to this. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't that offline.
we just need a support group. Anyway, so I don't think that it's really talked about much outside of the addiction circles, codependency, because those are the buzzwords in those circles. We don't really look at it in all the facets of our life that it could actually emerge in,
Right.
Except for, therapists do say, well, I don't want my client to become codependent. I hear that. I'm like, okay, all right.
Right. You're like, I can't. But what you said is like, I think it's pervasive. It's kind of like it's like a hemorrhage. Like if you're gonna be codependent in one aspect of your life, it's gonna show up in other aspects. Like I just did a keynote for a company and talked all about codependency in the workplace. And so it really is this pervasive thing. And then it's about, okay, well then what do I do with all this information? Because it's like, if you're giving everything over to other people, it's like your battery is drained. It's like, you're just like, and you've got nothing left, and you can't do life with a burnt out battery.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, going back to what I just said, I don't want clients to become codependent on me. I'm like, holy shit, are we codependent on them?
Ooh, well, yeah. And insurance companies.
Yes. Oh my God. My mind is blown right now. I'm reevaluating everything in this moment.
Yay!
It worked. Your process worked.
I developed this like this pyramid, right? So the boundary, the codependency is on the bottom of it. So we're only on like the first section of it.
My mind is blown. I don't know how much more work I can do.
I love it. Well, but it is like, it's like, how does it show up for you? Like, are you blaming everybody else? Like, are you overworking? Are you saying, look at how much I've done for you? Are you just being the straight up victim of your life?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because it does show up in so many different ways, and then people are like, okay, well, great. Like, now I know all this stuff. What do I do?
Right.
And so the next level is teaching them about boundaries. And what that means, and the different types of boundaries, and then I always like to throw in my little woo-woo is like, your boundaries are just the psych term for your aura and your energy field. And they're like, wait, what? So what do I do with that information?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But, there's like physical boundaries and emotional boundaries and, intellectual boundaries and space. I mean, there's all different types of boundaries, and it really is about teaching people how to check in with their own body, because your body is constantly talking to you. It's up to us to learn how to decode what it's saying, and like physical space, like, is kind of one of my things. I don't know if it's like growing up in New York and being on subways like a shit ton of my life
Yeah,
that like,
I used to live in New York for a little bit of time. So I get the crammed in like sardines. Even houses are so close together,
yeah,
I'm in the
yeah,
Midwest now and we've got space everywhere,
yeah,
The
yeah,
idea of like a row house or even apartments is like, why? Yeah.
right. Right. So it's like when somebody is in my like personal space, like I will feel it. Like I will
Yeah.
feel it in my stomach and I'll be like, oh, okay, that boundary just got crossed. Or if somebody says something and, it was like, oh, you think that, or that's how you feel, or, any one of those types of statements are also boundary crosses, and so I always like to, do you remember like when you were little and on the playground and somebody says something nasty to you and then you say, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off of me and sticks to you.
Yep.
That's fucking boundary. Like whoever that kid was, like, I don't know, brilliant. I'm like, oh my God, they're like this, I don't know, maybe it's the Dalai Lama. I have no idea. But like, it's that kind of thing where it's like, you want to be able to let the good stuff in and you want to be able to keep the bad stuff out because boundaries are pliable, right? And again, based on culture, based on family of origin, based on life experiences, your boundaries are going to be different,
Right.
from other people's, and then they're going to be different based on where you are. Like my boundaries, like if I'm doing a keynote, is going to be different than my boundaries if I'm like at a concert. It's and so to understand that they're pliable and different. Like I had to tell one of my girlfriends the other night, like, okay, I'm like, I have a personal space thing. Like you need to back up a little bit. And she was like, oh, okay. But I was like, I just felt like, oh my God, she's like totally on top of me. I'm like, like a close talker is like one of the things. I can't do it.
And I would suppose like, people that we work with aren't really that in tune with what their body is telling them in the first place, so understanding boundaries is really understanding what your body's telling you.
Totally.
About that. Like you might feel kind of weird or creeped out, but just go with it. Well, I think the idea is we don't have to just go with anything, right?
Right. Well, and then also when you feel that creeped outness,
It means something.
Listen to that. B, like, why am I feeling this way? What is it triggering inside of me? And then, what do I have to do to
fix it?
To fix it.
Exactly. To fix it.
Yeah. And so, and it might just be like stepping backward. It might be having to say something. And that's the other piece of it is like then once they start understanding about what a boundary is, like how you create boundaries are there are two ways to create boundaries. Learn how to say no.
That's hard.
Dude, I'm a recovering yes person. Yeah, sure. I'll help you move. No problem.
Right.
And then I'm like,
yeah, sure. I'll slip you in my schedule. No big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. Because I only have 8 clients today. Don't worry about it. I can put another one in.
Like, I don't need to eat or pee.
My office has like a line between like, the 50 and the hour mark of women therapists going to the bathroom. We're like, we need something that needs to happen here.
Literally in between clients, I run down the hallway like this.
Totally. Forget if you have coffee too. That's why you
exactly. Damn the coffee.
Right.
I'm going to dehydrate myself today because I have 8 clients back to back.
Right.
No eating, no drinking, no peeing. Got
right.
it.
But going back to that, like recovering, like yes person, like I used to say yes all the time. And then I was wondering why I was resentful and exhausted and depleted. And I remember learning about boundaries and, learning how to say no. And I remember somebody telling me, like, if you have trouble saying no, directly, just say, you know what, let me think about it and get back to you.
Mm-hmm. Give yourself a
And
minute. Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, because that yes is such a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's that underlying need to be liked and because people are conditioned to seek their worth externally. They just want to be liked, just like me. Even
Or
if you're
guilt, or I feel guilty sometimes if I say no.
right,
Like I don't want to feel guilty for saying no, so I'll just blurt out yes and then go, crap. Why did I say yes again? Like
right. Well, I teach my clients, like, they're like, okay, I started saying no and I'm trying to, they're like, but I feel so guilty. And I tell them good,
right.
because that guilt is you're kind of overriding your system. Like, that's the key to go, okay, I'm doing self-care and it feels weird and I feel guilty and I feel selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And you're supposed to feel like that. Which is weird, but then it will subside and then it'll pop up again depending on what it is and who it is or whatever. But it's like, when they start to see it as like, oh, this is actually a sign of change and this is a good thing,
Right.
then they get a little bit more used to it.
Well, and I always tell people too, and I need to always learn this myself. Most people don't expect you to give them an answer right now. So I don't know why we put that pressure on ourselves in the first place. Most questions are not so, I don't know, crisis oriented that you have to say yes right then. That's our own internal pressure,
Totally.
So
And then
true.
and then and then they're like, well, I feel bad if I. And I'm like, they're going to get over it. B, they're going to be like, oh, you know what? Actually, that doesn't work for me. I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, you know what their answer is? Oh, okay. No problem.
Yeah. What?
Whoa, like, mind blown. And if they do have a problem with it,
Tough
that's
shit.
their fucking problem. That's their
Exactly.
codependency. That's their victim. That's their shit that you don't have to worry about.
Then you give them your business card.
Right.
Here you go. Exactly.
Right.
All
There
right.
you go.
Well, we do need to wrap this conversation up. So if you have one word of wisdom or one phrase of wisdom, what would you give people?
Ooh, one word. I don't know if I could do
One
one.
phrase, a phrase.
Okay, I love this. This is my favorite quote right now. Paulo Coelho was getting interviewed, who wrote The Alchemist, which is an amazing book, got interviewed by Oprah, and they were talking
Oh,
about fear and how fear stops everybody, and the fear of the unknown and all this stuff. And he said, when you don't fear the unknown will be kind to you. And
hot.
so it's so good. I
That's
want to get
so
that like
good.
tattooed all over me. It's just so good, because so
Could be
many
my
times
next
people,
tattoo.
I know, right? Because so many people have that fear of the unknown, and it stops them and it keeps them in codependency, and all they're wanting is connection and acceptance. And so when we kind of lean into that fear, we notice that the universe supports us, and it's just these little baby steps, so it's like, lean into whatever you're scared of, because you're going to get supported, and it's going to transform your life, really, the shit out of it.
It's going to transform the shit out of it. All right. And that we are going to leave that right there. Okay. So all of Nadia's contact information is going to be in the show notes of the podcast. So all your social media handles and everything are going to be right there for everyone to check you out. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to have you back because I like you.
I like you too. I will come back.
All right.
And thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And so thank you for joining us on another episode of Kick Off Your Damn Heels. If anyone out there has questions or comments or would like to hear something from us in particular, please put that in the comments and leave us a review if you liked it. All right. Until next time, see you later.
Bye.